my opening statement is being a Christian in the first century was tough. It was real tough. It wasn't a popular thing to do. In fact, in those early few years of the first century, to be a Christian was actually life-threatening. It could affect your livelihood, your work, because in the Roman Empire they had trade guilds, a bit like our unions today, but I'm pretty sure our unions don't have patron gods. I don't know, maybe they do. I'm probably the president of the union. But in those days, in the first century, they had patron gods for a particular type of job. So if you were a stonesmith, or if you were a jeweler, or if you were something else, a builder, or any of those kinds of things, you would be part of a trade guild. This would allow you to trade, to work, and you would have to pay homage to the pagan god that was their patron god. You think that would be a problem to a Christian? Absolutely. So many Christians struggled to get work, to get a job in the first century because they professed to become Christians. Not only that, there was persecution. And the original persecution, this is a reenactment of persecution of John and James. But they were pulled in by the Jews themselves. Judaism felt that Christianity was a detraction from the original faith, and they decided that they needed to give these guys a hard time, these Christians, so they would come back into line and discard what they believed was a false Messiah, as in Jesus. So you imagine those early Christians who were predominantly, to start with, were predominantly Jewish, their own culture was rejecting them. You imagine that, how that would feel. To the point that the synagogues, they actually, when you used to enter into a synagogue or into the temple, you had to recite a certain mantra, if you like, declaring your following of God and your belief in the one true God. What they did to make it uncomfortable for the Christians is that they added a little bit at the end which would say that you did not believe that Jesus was the Messiah. You think that would be hard for a Christian? So Christians no longer could attend the synagogues, which they were used to, and wanted to congregate with those who they believed were their family. But more even so, it became extremely dangerous to be a Christian because you could actually get killed. You could lose your life. Imagine that if we, instead of going through the 28 fundamentals when we had a person who says, you know what, I think I'd like to be a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, if we said, well, let's just talk about the effects it's going to have on you. You know, you could lose your job, you're probably going to lose your family, and you may even lose your life, but you still want to join? Yeah. The crazy thing is, though, and what happened is that whilst Christianity was still kind of connected to Judaism, Rome, the empire, did not care. Because they just saw that, this is another one of those wacko Jewish sects, this Christianity thing. And they'll sort themselves out. But as Christians moved out of Israel and moved into the rest of the Roman Empire, as Jesus told them to do, and started to spread the gospel message, Gentiles became, or non-Jewish people became Christians. And Rome's going, wait a minute, this is a little bit disruptive in our empire, and we don't like this. So in AD 64, Christianity was declared illegal. It was illegal to be a Christian, punishable by death. And we've heard the stories, you know, the great bedtime stories for kids about how so many people were martyred on behalf of Jesus. What blows me away when you get into this history stuff, it's really, really interesting that those Christians standing in the middle there, they're not having a prayer, well, they probably are having a prayer meeting actually, but they're about to be greeted by a couple of big furry cats and not to be patted. But these Christians counted it. If they're praying there, they're saying, Lord, we count it a privilege to give our lives as a witness for you. See, the word martyr that we use, don't be a martyr, what that means literally is a witness. I bear witness in my death to Jesus Christ as my Redeemer. That's what it means. How cool is that? So these people literally would pray out loud, Lord, thank you. Thank you that I have the opportunity to give my life for you. Now, you would think that Christianity would have died out very quickly. But in fact, it grew exponentially. Thousands upon thousands of people became Christians even under persecution. And when you start looking in the history books, what they tell you is that the reason that Christianity was so popular amongst the people was because of the Christians themselves. They said, these Christians are amazing. When somebody is hungry or destitute, the first people to come and help them were the Christians. When children were cast out, because in Rome, if you didn't want a child, you just biffed it out. If it survived, well, good luck. If it died, well, that was the God's will. That's how they thought. But the Christians would say, no, all life is precious, no matter what skin colour they are, or what sect they belong to, we will take them under our wing. Christianity became popular because the Christians were contributors to society. Everywhere the Christians were, they brought hope, a level of peace and assurance to the people. Even though Rome began to hate them and started all sorts of vicious rumours about these dodgy Christians, it actually made a difference. When Christianity popped up in a city or a town, it changed the populace's ideas and thoughts in a good way, because the Christians were contributors to society. Really interesting. But something fascinating happens when we get to the 4th century. The emperor at the time, who was known as Constantine, he converted to Christianity in about 313, or around that time. And he decided as the emperor that it could no longer be an illegal religion. That would be a little bit awkward, being the emperor worshipping an illegal religion. So he makes Christianity legal in 313. He makes it legal. It's okay to be a Christian now. So everybody breathes a sigh of relief who are Christians. Whew, we're not going to get persecuted anymore. That's good. A few years later, under Theodosius, AD 380, Christianity then becomes the official faith of the Roman Empire. That now means that any other faith is frowned upon. So now it's popular to be a Christian. And historians say that for the first time in the history of Christianity, something happened. A new group of Christians turned up, called complacent Christians. It suddenly became popular. It suddenly became profitable to be a Christian. So pagans were converting left, right and centre because they couldn't work, they couldn't keep going in life, and they wanted to advance in political arena, and unless they were Christians, it wouldn't work. So we had all these people coming in professing to be Christians, but really not knowing what they were in for. And as they say, the rest is history. You can see that the church starts to change. Political intrigue starts to take over. And then there becomes these furry lines that start to blur between faith and politics. And things start to go a little bit awry. Well, fast forward now to the 21st century. And I'd like to suggest that complacent Christianity is still around, live and kicking, in many respects. And maybe even sometimes we fall into that category. But it's growing exponentially for one major reason, because of this one other thing that's popping into our world that's been around for a while, actually, but has taken hold in this media-saturated world we live in, and that's consumer Christians. Consumer Christians. We no longer contribute, we start to consume this Christianity thing. And what's even worse is that churches, whole denominations are buying into this idea of consumerism. Check out the way churches advertise. So, let's take a look at this. I think consumer Christianity is extremely dangerous. And the scary thing is that every single one of us here this morning have bought into it some way or some form. Whether you want to admit it or not, we're all guilty of consumer Christianity to some degree. And let's just unpack it a little bit. So what is a consumer? Okay, well, if you go to the dictionary or the Google thing, you'll come up with this kind of explanation. A consumer is someone who spends time or money. Generally, we think of it more like on the money side. Oh, now Google decided it wants to help me. Go away, Google. That's dangerous. Someone who spends time or money for personal use. Did you get that? Don't text me. I heard that. I got good... Look at the size of my ears, Dana. I can hear anything. Oh, okay. For personal use. Did you get that? A consumer is a person who uses their resources for personal use, not for the use of others. Can you see how that could conflict with the very character of Christianity, even at the very outset? So consumers take on, or this kind of, the isms, we're part of Adventism, Well, there's another ism, and it's called consumerism. And it's kind of a religion. And we don't even know it. So here's the definition of consumerism. Now think of this. It's a social and economic order that encourages an acquisition of goods and services in ever-increasing amounts. Isn't that a good explanation? I like that. Well, don't get me wrong. I like the way it's explained. It's a social and economic order that encourages an acquisition of goods and services in ever-increasing amounts. That kind of sums up our society pretty well, don't you think? Chris teased me this morning when I fired up my computer upstairs and I got online to get onto Facebook to put in the live stream code, because my homepage on my web server, or Internet Explorer, is a particular shop. That's my homepage. It goes directly to it. Not the news. I don't care about the news. It's a shop. One of my favourite shops, Torpedo 7. It's bike clothing, bike gear, all that kind of stuff. So that's the first thing that turns up on my page. Have I bought into consumerism? Guilty as charged. See, even pastors aren't exempt. It's there. Since the 50s, the rise of media, pretty much. And just think about that. Where do we get the word media from? It's a medium. Okay? So it's the idea that it's a medium, it's a tool, a way of getting information through to us. So since the 50s and the rise of media, the Western world has been obsessed with the accumulation of stuff. I can't think of a better word than stuff. If you've ever watched VeggieTales, they have one about Stuff Mart. Yeah. Stuff. To be fair, though, consumerism has been around for a while. Jesus even warns against it. Did you know that? Check it out in Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 to 21, says this: Don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also. See, consumer mindset was alive and well in Jesus' day. It's still here today, but even more so, I believe. It would appear that the accumulation of stuff is important to us. It's really interesting. Just look in my garage. And somebody said to me the other day when I was talking about our house, they go, oh, your house is the one where the garage is sort of bigger than it should be compared to other houses. It's bigger than the rest of the house. They're not entirely wrong. It is quite a big garage, to be fair. They had a fancy word, I couldn't remember it. So why do we have to accumulate stuff? What is it about human nature that makes us want to accumulate stuff? Well, interesting thing is that consumerism has told us a lie. The lie is this. Wait for it. That stuff equals happiness. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand this stuff. Use that word again. Stuff equals happiness. Consumerism tells us that if you have the latest phone, the coolest car, the best mountain bike, or even the coolest gear to go with the mountain bike, it makes you happy. Do you follow that? That's very much the case. You watch any of the ads on TV or anywhere else, and they will tell you, you know what, the best way to be happy is to have this, or to eat this. Weird thing about it is most of the stuff they tell you to eat makes you fat, but then makes you unhappy. And then they sell you the stuff that helps you to lose weight to make you feel happy again. It's a vicious circle. But what we find in this equation, because it's not complete, but stuff equals happiness. That's how our world thinks today. Or things. We can upgrade anything. Phones, TVs, cars, spouses. Pretty much anything. If you go and buy a new phone, they will inevitably say to you, if you're with a bigger company, they will say, hey, if you want to spend an extra $10 a month, you can automatically upgrade when the new phone comes out in 6 months' time. Or whatever. It's true, isn't it? Every time it's the hard sell. Consumerism, because stuff makes you happy. But you see, there's something interesting about this, because, well, in order for you to get stuff, you need something. Unfortunately, you can't walk, well, you almost can walk into a shop and walk out without having to pay anything, but you still have to pay. So what do we need to get stuff? Money. It's going to pop up. There it is, money. We need money. And in order to earn money, there's an old adage that says, time is money. So we need time. So we want to invest, if we want to be happy, we've got to invest all our time into making money so that we can get stuff, and now we're going to be happy. Do you get me? Or as they said, do you feel me? Okay. You hear what they're saying? This is consumerism 101. This is what the world has bought as a lie. And every single one of us has picked up on it. And we don't even realize it. That's the crazy thing. And you say, well, Andrew, so what's wrong with stuff, man? You know, I like some of my stuff. Hey, I like stuff too. Is stuff a sin? No. Is money a sin? No. So what's the deal? What's the problem? As we said in Sabbath school, so what? Well, it's where your priority sits in regards to stuff and money. And Jesus actually talks about this. Let's go back to verse 21 of chapter 6 of Matthew. I'll whack it on the screen so it's nice and clear. Jesus says, wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also. And if you read on in those texts, Jesus starts talking about the eye. And it's interesting because what he's really saying, because for ages as a kid I thought, what is he on? He's gone way off on track now, talking about eyes. Eyes are the heart of the soul, blah, blah, blah. What he's saying is that whatever you focus on is your priority. Okay? And he goes further down, if we get down to verse 24 of chapter 6, he makes it real clear, and as Jesus can only be, graciously blunt. Okay? Here it is. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Now, if you have an older translation of the Bible, that word money will be saying mammon. Okay. And to be fair, and even though I like many of the modern translations, to be fair, money doesn't really cut it here. It's not really what it means. See, the word mammon in the Greek text doesn't just mean money. It means what you do with the money. And it actually means to deify the money, to make it a god. So that's why Jesus says you can't love God and then worship money. That's really what he's saying. Or you can't worship stuff, because they're going to conflict with each other. Are you with me? And the rest of that chapter, he said, you've got to get your priorities right. Now, what Jesus is saying is that we can make stuff and money an item of worship in regards to us. Now, some of you are going, yeah, well, it's those rich people. They're the ones, they'll never get to heaven. Well, the weird thing is, it's not often the ones who are very wealthy who are so obsessed with it. Did you know that? It's the ones who don't have a lot of wealth that actually become obsessed with trying to get it. This is the lie that we have bought. What Jesus is saying is that you and I have to do our best to get our priorities right. There's nothing wrong with money, nothing wrong with stuff, but it needs to find its rightful place. It's merely a tool. It's merely something that you can use, but it's not the beginning of everything. And in fact, God says that He is the owner of the cattle on 1,000 hills. He is the one who gives us the ability and the skill and the talent to be able to work, to earn money, to buy stuff. But He is also the source of extreme happiness. God Himself, not the created things. Okay. So what's the impact on the church? We say, well, I probably need to cut back on buying stuff or focus a little bit more. Well, no, it's even more insidious than that. The impact of consumerism on the church is more than just what we've just talked about. It actually gets deeper, and it comes on in our commitment to church. It impacts our commitment to God. Now, when I say church, I'm actually meaning God as well. I'm not just meaning this little group of people here. I'm meaning the wider body, the kingdom, the whole thing, okay? So today, many Christians have become consumers of church. Now, if you don't know, I'm the chaplain down at the school, down at our amazing school down there at the Seventh-day Adventist Church School. They're a great bunch of kids, awesome teachers, great staff, especially in the admin office, amazing staff member there. But one of the parts of my job as a chaplain is to interview potential students and their parents. And I sit down with them, and one of the things I have to do is discern whether they're Christian family or non-Christian family. And that's for the government. We have to prove that we need to exist as a Christian school. And so when I ask these people, what church do you attend? This is the kind of statement I get quite regularly. Well, we used to attend the Baptist church, but we decided we'd go to this church, or that church, or the other church. Now, to you and I, that might be, oh, well, they must have found some new doctrine or theology that they agreed with or didn't disagree or disagreed with or whatever. That has nothing to do with it. Doctrine and theology does not come up. Their reason for changing, oh, they have a better youth group. Oh, their pastor, he speaks really good and only lasts for 20 minutes. Maybe the worship is far more engaging, or they just go on and on. It's all about them. Now, I'm not judging them. Please don't take that, because we do the same thing on so many levels. But that's where we're at as Christians. We base our attendance, we base our connection all on consumerism. What's in it for me? Wow. I find that fascinating. Now, as I said, don't go bashing other denominations on this and go, oh, yeah, no, man, those other churches, they've got it all. No, there's some amazingly devoted, hard, powerful, passionate Christians who love Jesus, and you know what? Consumerism's impacted our church as well. Our own denomination. We're certainly not immune by any means. Not in the slightest. Jesus said in verse 21 of chapter 6, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. If it's all about me, that's where my heart is. Sometimes I think we come to church just to worship ourselves. Harsh but true. You go, no, don't be stupid, Andrew. That's not how we think. That might be for you, but it's not for me. I wouldn't do that. Well, tell me I'm wrong. Have you ever said, you know, the worship today just didn't really cut it for me? I'm not so sure the pastor got it right today. Well, he went way over time. Well, we did too. Okay. You know what I'm saying? Or, I'm not going to go this week because a certain worship band's on. Or, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that because of... And suddenly we find ourselves feeling a little bit uncomfortable because, we might be consumer Christians. Just a tad. We need to keep moving. The other thing that might come out is when it comes time for us to serve in the church. And every single one of us at some point has come back to the person who's asking, we'd love you to serve here, or we'd love to serve there. They come back with this one statement. Wait for it. There. I don't have the time. Why do we say that? Because time equals money, equals stuff, equals happiness. So if you take my time and you want me to volunteer, that means that that's cutting into the time I can make money, which means that I can't get stuff, which means that won't make me happy. And this is the lie. Because we are, and please indulge me today because I really need to get to this point, because we are not wired for this. God wired us to serve. He wired us to get joy out of helping others. Have you ever wondered why the accumulation of stuff doesn't make us happy? It's because we're not wired to accumulate stuff. We're wired to give to others, to serve to others. That's what we were created in the image of God for. Jesus came to remind us of that. He said, I did not come to be served, but to serve. I'm not going to read the text today because we don't have time, but what I'm going to encourage you to do is write these texts down. They're going to come up onto the screen. Only the reference is going to come up, not the actual text. So write them down, and I'd love you to discuss these texts together as you close Sabbath this Sabbath. Okay? That's your challenge. Because you really need to unpack this. Every one of us does. Every one of us needs to come to the foot of the cross today and go, in light of what Jesus has done for me, do I want to be a contributor or a consumer Christian? So here it is, Romans chapter 12, verses 10 to 13. Write it down. And I'll give you the gist of this text. It says to work hard, to serve, and to be eager to serve. If you can't catch up or keep up with these, then let me know and I'll give you the text afterwards. Romans 15, verse 1. This is really basic and clear. We need to consider the needs of others. Here's the text I just quoted before in Mark 10, verse 45. Jesus came to serve, not be served. This is Jesus' example to us. If it's good enough for Jesus, then it must be good enough for us. Oh, and you know why the church grew in the first century? Because this is what they did. Ephesians 4:28. It's on the screen. Ephesians 4:28. Work so that you have something to give to others. Well, now that's a weird concept. Consumerism says make sure you've got your nest egg so you can retire, go on those world trips. I don't know whether we'll ever get cruises again, Robert and Sharon. I don't know whether that's ever going to happen. Sorry. The new normal may be no cruise ships. I'm just depressed. 60% of our congregation. Oh, there you go. 1 John chapter 4, verses 19 and 20. This is it. This is the challenge. John says here that our response to God's love should be in serving others. Last two texts, Proverbs 19, verse 17. Doing good is like loaning to God. Proverbs 19, verse 17. Doing good is like loaning to the Lord. What a weird concept that is. And it's not as if he's going to pay you back, okay? What he pays you back with is this incredible joy that wells up inside you when you serve someone else. And the last text, Proverbs 22, verse 9. By blessing others, the scripture promises us that we will be blessed. And again, I'm not talking about financial blessings. Maybe you will be blessed financially, but that's not what you're doing it for. You will find joy in serving others. You know, as Christians, we tend to have forgotten what church exists for. Church doesn't exist just for what we're doing here today. This arena is where we're supposed to equip each other, build each other up so that we can go out and be the hands and feet of Jesus in our community. So that we can declare the gospel not just by words but by action. That's what we're here for. We have come up with some warped idea that church exists to serve us. And if that's the case, then we're just some kind of club that has an extremely high membership cost. I don't know of any other club that would ask for 10% of your income as a membership. Today, as we wrap it up, and to quote an amazing man, Martin Luther King, I have a dream. And let me just stop for a minute. I have to say this. In light of what's going on in America, I need to tell you today that in Christianity there is no place for racism. No place. And please be aware that racism is not just white against black, it's against anybody who you think you are superior to. And in God's eyes, we are all sinners. And we bleed the same. But Jesus bled for us. Make that very clear. There is no place in Christianity for any kind of racism, prejudice, or anything else. And I have a dream today that we would be a body of believers. A body of believers who meet with each other to worship God and to encourage and build up one another. Not to come and worship the pastor or the worship team. That we would be a body of believers who train and equip themselves so that they can go out and meet the needs of their community for no other reason than it's the right thing to do. That we would be a body of believers that are not disturbed or distracted by race, colour or culture, but come together as one body, saved by grace. That we would be a body of believers who know what they believe and who they believe in, and will not be pushed around by every idea or conspiracy theory. I long to see that church. I long to see that church here in Tauranga. And only then will our church grow. Only then will we truly be a body of believers who are vibrant in all that we do. But I also know that our pastoral team has that same dream. But we can't do it alone. In fact, we're not supposed to. When we step into that water of baptism and we say, I want to follow Jesus, we're committing to being contributor Christians, not consumers. We say, Lord, we want to be part of your kingdom, but we want to contribute to your kingdom. We want to do whatever we can in light of your amazing grace. We will make you our priority, Lord. So what are you going to be? Are you going to be a consumer, or are you going to be a contributor? See, I challenge not just you today, I challenge myself. Sometimes we can get so busy working for the Lord that we forget that we should be connecting with the Lord. So today, even me, even Pastor Hannah, all of us desperately need to search our hearts and say, where are our priorities? Where do we place God in our hearts? Because where our heart is, or where our treasure is, I should say, that's where our heart will be. If we are upset because of things that happen in church, we need to stop and think and say, well, is that really important in light of everything else? If church exists to serve others, then why am I so concerned about myself? Should I be concerned about the others that need to be served? Stop and think about that. May God bless you today as you make the decision to be contributors, not consumers.